ورسوله النبي الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا من فضلك علما. نعم تعلم وتذكر التذكير النفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث بالتمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى خير الدلالة تعليم هدى ابتغاء وجهه سبحانه وتعالى وثوابه وقربه. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد ذلك السالم وذلك الجار واجمعنا به كل أطوارنا وعلى صحبه نور. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. سبحان الله والحمد سبحان الله العظيم. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد ذلك السالم وذلك الجار واجمعنا به في كل أطوارنا وعلى صحبه نور عدد خلق رضا نفسه وزينة عرش ذلك كلمات عدد كل حرف كتب ويكتب وقرئ ويقرأ وسمع ويسمع ورؤيا ويرى بالعبد ودهر الداهرين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Continuing with our lessons from the book Tawjīh Mardāt Bārīh. And yesterday Habib Umar was speaking about the service to the religion and how also the dunya does not weigh in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or does not weigh anything in the estimation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to even the weight or the wing of a mosquito. And that people who are working for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and generally Muslims, should also not have anything in their hearts towards attachments in the dunya, because on the day of Qiyamah, a person who was one of good deeds and stayed away from sins, but he had an estimation for the dunya, this person will be called and it will be said, look, this is someone who esteemed what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has despised. And in this regard, it is also important for a person that they continue learning what are those things which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala esteems and what are those things which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala despises. Because if a person is not in the circles of knowledge, then generally a person will not learn what are those things which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes and what are those things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala despises. And this may also, for example, just the way a person deals with their wife and children. A person might enjoy time with their wife and child, or their children, or a wife with her husband and spouse. But if this relationship leads to one in which a person neglects their duties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu la tulhikum amwalukum wa awladukum an dhikrillah. O you who believe, do not allow your children and your wealth to distract you from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَن يَفْعَلْ ذَلِكَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ. And whoever lets that happen, or whoever does that, then indeed they will be of the losers. And so the mizan, or the yardstick, or the measure in which the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deal with everything that they have been given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is a scale in which they seek only the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Habib Umar finished up, we were still busy with yesterday's lesson, in which the students were reading the book Al-Ghurar, which deals with the biographies of the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Abu Umratan by Imam al-Haddad, and the subsequent commentary by Habib Ahmad Zain al-Habashi. And Habib Umar was speaking about how we need to carry within our hearts the lights of these people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and their humanity, right, in everything that we do, in our standing, in our sitting, in our coming, and in our going, in that our interactions with people should see that we are a people on a mission, and we have a message, and we have a mission, and we carry light, we carry etiquette with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we carry humility in our hearts, and we do not carry the darkness of all these negative qualities that Habib mentioned, like lying, ghibah, namima, transgressing against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not recognizing his blessings, and having a bad opinion or bad intentions. And then we ended off by talking about Habib Umar is talking on the day of Qiyamah, قَدْ عَلِمَ كُلُّ أُنَاسٍ مَشْرَبَهُم. Every person will be called to their way on the day of Qiyamah. Then Habib Umar continues the lesson and says, هَؤُلَاءِ أَلْصَقُ الْأَئِمَّةِ بِإِمَامِ الْأَئِمَّةِ. Speaking about these great masters of Hadramaut, or the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the book Imam al-Haddad, when he mentioned all the awliya from the great awliya from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and then specifically his chain of narration, And it is well known that in Hadramaut, and specifically in the city of Tarim, it is a unique situation in which their chains of narration are their sanad. Oh, sorry, their chains of narration or their sanad are their lineage. Their sanad is their nasab. And nasab means the lineage, father to father, father to son, father to son, father to son, or son to father, going all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ. There has not been a single generation in the Sada al-Ba'alawi, except that in each and every single generation, the father became the epitome of knowledge, of spirituality, and of da'wah. And the Habib Umar would explain it by saying, when they would take all this knowledge that was passed down, it has been, for example, an alim from an alim, 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 going all the way back to the greatest alim, the Prophet ﷺ. And then from a mutawadi', from someone who was humble, from a mutawadi', from a mutawadi', from a mutawadi', going all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ. From a zahid to a zahid to a zahid to a zahid. Zahid is one who is an ascetic, all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ. From a qutub to a qutub to a qutub, all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ. And so all of these qualities and traits which they resemble is not just something which they picked up from anywhere, but it has been inherited from not any person, but from father to son, father to son. There are many ulama in the world, and there are many awliya, and there are many people with chains of narrations. And it is also a customary practice for many of the ulama to write what is called a thabat. And a thabat is a collection of all the books that they have read and the ijazats that they have collected from different mashayikh. So and so will say, for example, I read this certain book to this teacher so and so from this particular country, and I read this particular book from this Moroccan sheikh, and I got ijazah in this particular book from this Syrian sheikh. And what is unique about Hadramaut is, even though they have many asanid and many chains of narrations from all different mashayikh all around the world, but there is a particular chain of narration which involves the nasab, which involves the lineage of the Sada al-Ba'alawi. And this is known as the golden chain, Silsilat al-Dhahabiyya, and it doesn't exist in many parts of the world. And this is why even great scholars and great ulama and even great awliya would travel to Tarim to try and get this sanad. Even in the Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, there is a sanad in the Sada al-Ba'alawi from father to son, going all the way back to Imam al-Bukhari. And this is mentioned in the last chapters of Habib Salim bin Hafidh's book, Al-Minhatul Ilah, to such an extent that great ulama also would write to the Mufti of Tarim, Habib al-Mashhur and Habib Umar, seeking ijazah in this particular sanad. And when the communists came to Tarim, and likewise when they went to India and many parts of the Muslim world, one of their objectives was to cut and break these chains of narrations, because the level of knowledge was so high in those times that, and the cities of ilm, the ulama that had established knowledge in the cities, knowledge they would say would even be oozing from the walls of the cities. If a person just came and did nothing, but just spent time, they would become of the ulama and awliya because of how the city was organized. And one of the reasons of the communists and the colonialists coming was to break these chains of narration, and therefore they killed the ulama, they abducted them, they closed down the centers of learning to prevent these next generations from imbibing this inheritance. But obviously they desire to extinguish the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan is greater than this. And so when Umar speaks about these people, and anyone who has read Imams of the Valley, for example, or anyone that reads the story of the Sada al-Ba'alawi specifically, and because we are speaking about the Sada al-Ba'alawi, one will realize their special station with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. From the history of how Sayyidina Muhajir Ahmad bin Isa came from Basra to Hadramaut, and why he chose this place to be an enclave or a haven for the Sada al-Ba'alawi, and for his offspring to develop away from the fitna and the tribulations that were affecting the Muslim Ummah at that time. And it became the most ideal spot for them to continue their methodology of the three objectives of knowledge, spiritual purification, and da'wah. Then when one reads the life stories of these Imams, one is amazed at obviously their qualities. If you take the life of any one of them, for example, Shaykh Abu Bakr bin Salim, or Imam al-Haddad, or Faqih al-Muqaddam, and even of the mashayikh that are like we take Habib Umar, for example. If we look, for example, Imam al-Haddad, he has what is called it is a collection of his adhkar. Some of his students just collected the adhkar that he would do every day. For example, from the time he woke up in the morning till the time he went to bed in the evening, what were the different sorts of adhkar? And they've actually collected this into a book, and it's actually called Wasilatul Ibad ila Zadil Ma'ad. And this is a collection of Imam al-Haddad's adhkar. And if one reads this book, and this is only a collection of things which you would do on a daily basis over and above all the other adhkar that you would do at different munasabat or at different times of the year. If one looks at these adhkar, one would think and imagine that Imam al-Haddad did nothing else in his life besides just do dhikr the whole day, dhikr and ibadah. And we'd read also how he would perform 200 rak'ats every day in the Masjid Bārīh after his lessons. However, if one looks at the ilm aspect, how they dealt with knowledge and how much they would read and how much time they would spend reading, we read in the biographies how Imam al-Haddad would spend the entire night with some of his companions in Masjid al-Hujayrah from the time of Fajr all the way till Fajr or till Tahajjud, reading and revising and reading specifically also the books of the biographies of the ancestors of the Sari al-Alawi, over and above the books of fiqh. The grandson of Imam al-Haddad, Habib, Ahmad bin Hassan bin Imam al-Haddad, mentions, he says, I read to my father, who is Imam Hassan, he says, I read to my father the Tuhfa of Ibn Hajar, which is a commentary on the Minhaj, 4 times. And the book is about 10 to 12 volumes long. To read a book like that, one requires hours and hours and hours. When we read the history of the Salib Alawi as well, when they would go to the ziyarah of Nabīh Hud, in those 4 or 5 days or 6 days, they would read the entire Shudur al-Dhahab, for example. Shudur al-Dhahab is a book on Arabic Nahu and grammar, or the Risala al-Qushayriya. And some of them would read the entire Ihya Ulumuddin. And so when one reads, even Habib Ahmad Zain al-Habashi, who read to Imam al-Haddad, he enumerates all the books that he read to Imam al-Haddad, and if you calculate it, you think they had to be reading every day, the whole day. So when you look at how they dealt with knowledge, you think they did nothing else besides just read books and study. And then if we look at their da'wah and how they went out and called people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and interacted with people and reconciled between tribes, sat with their families and their students and attended gatherings, and also community interactions. When one reads about this, when one would think they did nothing else besides just interact with people and spend all their time in da'wah. And this is a sir, this is a secret and a barakah which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them, in that they gave kullu dhi haqqin haqqa. They gave the right of every person to them, they gave the right of everything to itself. Meaning, when it came to knowledge, they gave knowledge its right. When it came to da'wah, they gave knowledge they gave da'wah its haqq. When it came to spirituality, they gave spirituality its haqq. And Imam al-Ghazali mentions this in the Bidayat al-Hidayah as well. If a person does everything at its set time and they train themselves to do everything at a set time, then this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put barakah in their lives. And so, if one understands the nature of these people, and it is very important when we understand that when we say that their sanad is their lineage, there's a very, very big implication, or there's a significant implication in mentioning. So, for example, if I take knowledge from a teacher of mine, but this teacher is not my father, then I've taken the knowledge and I've taken whatever I was able to benefit in the time that I spent, for example, only in the time reading to them. So, for example, if I read to a teacher 1 hour every morning, and I read books and books and books, I can say this is my teacher, I have an ijazah from him, I've benefited from him. But the time that I've spent with him has only been 1 hour every day, that over many, many years. But there is a very big difference in saying that I took this knowledge from my father. Because generally your parents or your father or your mother, you would spend your entire life with them. And in a person's daily habits in their home, for example, there is a way in which you would do certain things which you have become accustomed to because your parents brought you up in that particular way. So if you were brought up in a particular, for example, every day after Fajr, that you could not go out or you would not be allowed to leave the house in the morning for school or for on the weekends, anything, unless you had read your juz of Quran, then it becomes your habit, that becomes your custom. And if your parents have trained you with this, then this becomes your lifestyle. And likewise, you will in turn bring up your children in that same particular way. And likewise. So in the household of the Prophet ﷺ, there were ways in which he brought up Sayyidina Hassan and Sayyidina Hussein, and the way he brought up Sayyidina Fatima Zahra and Sayyidina Ali, and the wisdom of the Prophet ﷺ, obviously. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had granted the Prophet ﷺ, and it is our aqidah that he was the most intelligent and the wisest of all human beings. He brought Sayyidina Ali into his house to bring him up because he would be the only one, or only one who would be brought up and trained at the hand of the Prophet ﷺ, would be worthy of Sayyidina Fatima Zahra. And then they were regularly in and out of the house of the Prophet ﷺ, and him in and out of their houses. And we know also through the ahadith and just what has been revealed to us of some of their biographies of how he would teach them specific things for themselves. Right, in how the Tasbih Fatimi, for example, Sayyidina Fatima Zahra wanted a servant, or Sayyidina Ali wanted a servant for Sayyidina Fatima to help her with her work. The Prophet ﷺ wanted them to be on a higher level and gave them this adhkar, the Tasbih Fatimi, to do. And likewise, when she gave Sayyidina Hassan and Hussein once to wear some form of jewelry or some form of silver, she saw the Prophet ﷺ didn't even mention, but she said she noticed in his face his displeasure, and she immediately went in and took it away and gave it away in charity. And so there was a more stricter tarbiyah which the Prophet ﷺ obviously gave to his immediate household. So the same way that Sayyidina Fatima and Sayyidina Ali learned these things from the Prophet ﷺ, they would teach Sayyidina Hassan and Hussein. And Sayyidina Hassan and Hussein obviously would in the same way train their children. Sayyidina Hussein would have taught Imam Ali Zain al-Abidin, and Sayyidina Ali Zain al-Abidin would have taught Sayyidina Muhammad al-Baqir, Ja'far al-Sadiq. And so this has continued from the time in which Sayyidina Fatima Zahra has been in the household of the Prophet ﷺ till our time today. This tarbiyah has not been broken. And when we're talking about tarbiyah, we're not specifically speaking about knowledge in the sense of just reading the books, but the way in which the lifestyle was lived. And this is one of the benefits and blessings of Tareem, and why people come to Tareem, and why people especially want to bring their children up in Tareem. And we mentioned this in our first lessons, in that everything that they do has a prophetic touch. There's a normal way in which people do things, there's a normal way in which even certain of the ulama do things, but the Ahlul Bayt of Tareem have a very specific way. We mentioned how they would ensure that even the child is breastfed an hour before Fajr, so that the biological clock of the child becomes accustomed to that this is a way, this is the time to be awake. They will allow the children to play outside after Fajr to Ishraq, because this is also a Mubarak time and it is not a time to sleep. Everything in which they do, the way they, from the time they woke up in the morning till the time they went to bed, there was a specific way in which they trained their children, which they inherited from their fathers, from their fathers, from their fathers, from their fathers, going all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ. To such an extent that if we read sometimes some of these stories, we might even think in our day and age that this is a form of extremism. But when we see the effects of the tarbiyah on the children of Tareem, that they would say that the hair on their mustache would not even come out, and they had already reached the levels of spiritual unveilings, which is known as mukashafa. And so, for example, they would train their children never to enter or never to shower in the bathroom in a state of complete nakedness, and to always wear cover their nakedness, even when they are in privacy with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or when they are in the shower. And when eating, the intentions that would be made, or the intentions that would be needed to be done when eating, when drinking, when going out. So all of these things were extremely important in molding the Ahl Bayt, especially in Tareem. So we just wanted to mention some of that introduction, because we will now notice what Umar is going to say about them. And when he speaks about them, he says, هؤلاء ألصق الأئمة بإمام الأئمة. These great imams, these great Sada, which Imam al-Haddad has spoken about, they are the closest of all the leaders to the Imam al-A'immah, to the leader of all leaders. They are the closest imams to the Imam of all imams, meaning the Prophet ﷺ. وَأَقْرَبُ الْأَئِمَّةِ مِنْ إِمَامِ الْأَئِمَّةِ. And they are the most proficient in following him. Al-Saq is like, lasaq means to stick something. So they are the ones who are closest to the Prophet ﷺ. ثابت عنايته عليهم من كل جانب فآثرهم. The Prophet ﷺ's special care was poured out upon them, and so therefore he has preferred them over others. A person has care for his students, but if you know your children have, and your lineage has a big role to play, then you will give them special attention. And so the Prophet's special attention is fallen on his prophetic household, and specifically this prophetic household. فَمَا أَحَبَّ أَحَدًا مِثْلَهُم. And so the Prophet does not love anyone as much as he loves them. قال سيدنا Imam al-Haddad. Imam al-Haddad also in mentioning this particular blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in a poem, in a line of his poetry, وَلِي مِنَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ جَدِّي عِنَايَةٌ. And I have from the Prophet ﷺ, who is my grandfather, inayatun, a special care and a special concern from him. وَوَجْهٌ, I have access to him. وَإِمْدَادٌ, and spiritual assistance. وَإِرْثٌ, and the spiritual inheritance. وَإِيثَارُ, and him preferring me over everyone else. And this is part of أَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ, mentioning the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, when it comes to these things, we mentioned in one of the lessons, this concept of istifa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's system on this earth is not a system where everyone is equal and everyone can do whatever they want to. One of the systems of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this earth is istifa. يَخْتَصُّ بِرَحْمَتِهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. Allah chooses whom He wills for His mercy. Allah chooses for His mercy whom He wills. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the people of Badr. Right? Could anyone that accepted Islam after the conquest of Mecca, and we spoke the other days about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says that those who accepted Islam after the conquest of Mecca will never be equal to those who accepted Islam before the conquest of Mecca. Now, can someone who accepted Islam after the conquest of Mecca come and think now, but no, why? And I'm also a Muslim and I'm supposed to have the same. No, this is the way and the sunnah and the methodology of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah chooses, and He has this istifa. He chooses people for Himself. And what is required is for the one who is chosen to have humility, and what is required for those who are not chosen is to be humble and to come to those whom Allah has chosen and to learn from them, right? And to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through them. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts everyone, and then everyone will be together on the day of Qiyamah. But Shaitan's way is to create this hasad, to create this enmity between people, or this jealousy that why did Allah choose this one and why did Allah not choose me? The thing which allowed, or the thing which didn't allow the Kuffar and the Quraysh of Mecca to accept Islam was because they said, why was the Prophet ﷺ chosen and he's from this particular family, or he was an orphan? And the only reason in which many Kuffar died on Kufr is because they could not accept this istifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah chose. They would say in the Quran, why was the Quran not revealed on people from any of the two great tribes? Meaning there were other people that they thought might have been more worthy. And even they would mock the Prophet ﷺ by calling him the orphan of Abu Talib. And so this concept of istifa is extremely important to understand, in that, and even in the spiritual path, when people are taking a path of knowledge, when they're taking a path of spiritual purification or da'wah, everyone is trying their best, or everyone is doing what they can, not because of vying with each other, but because one desires closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and tries to learn sincerity, and then one only sits back within doing one's effort to see where does the istifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lie. I have been working, I've been trying, I've been doing so much, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses to make someone else the vanguard of da'wah. He chooses someone else to be at the forefront of, for example, these sciences in the Sharia. He chooses someone else to be, for example, a big da'i. Am I going to become upset? Am I going to get jealous? Am I going to start thinking, but I've been working so hard and I've been studying harder than him and I've been doing more than him? No, of course not. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's istifa. Jealousy and enmity in the hearts towards anyone for a blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them, then it is as if that person is at enmity with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they are almost saying, with the state that they are in, that, Ya Allah, I know better than you who be getting blessings. This is almost a form of kufr, and that a person vies with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over who gets his blessing. And so likewise in the spiritual path, we are all just there to see whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen. When Allah manifests those whom He has chosen, then we go and we do khidmah to them, service for them, and we try and get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by helping them in their path and helping ourselves, and then we will be lifted up to their level. But if we fall to the dictates of shaitan, then we start having enmity to such people and we get cut off from them, and because they have this istifa from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will continue. They will not be harmed by anyone who has jealousy against them. Then says, آثرهم فلا يبلغ أحد شأوهم. The Prophet ﷺ himself preferred them, and so no one will ever reach their levels. And even the ulama, and even the Ahl Bayt from amongst the ulama from the non-Sa'ad al-Ba'alawi, they have all also written about the very special, particular, distinguished nature which was given to Sa'ad al-Ba'alawi, specifically the Al-Karim. Many of the Ahl Bayt as well from countries of Lebanon and Syria and Egypt, great ulama, but when they wrote about the Sa'ad al-Ba'alawi, when they read their life stories, they would say that they are on a completely different level. When Sultan al-Hadrati atharahum, the Prophet ﷺ, who is the Sultan, he is the leader of the people in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is the leader of the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has chosen them. And if the Prophet ﷺ chooses someone, then obviously no one can reach the level. فَكُلٌّ يَلْزَمُ مَكَانَهُ. So therefore everyone should maintain their places with etiquette. Everyone maintains their places with etiquette. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses anyone, everyone maintains their places. There's no agitation externally, and there's also no agitation internally. One is happy because the responsibilities that sometimes come with being in the forefront are great indeed. And Imam al-Haddad also would teach Habib Ahmad Hussein al-Habashi that do not ask for these great spiritual stations, because they come with lots and lots of difficulties and trials and tribulations. And then if you must ask for it with afiyah, with well-being and gentleness. وكما قال الحبيب أبو بكر بن شهاب, one of the poets, famous ulama and poets in Hadramaut, Habib Abu Bakr bin Shahab, he said, لا بما قد علمتموه من الخير ولكن قدت بذلك الإرادة. Explaining that when people are sometimes amazed at these great stations and they look, for example, at Habib Umar or Shaykh Abu Bakr bin Salim or Imam al-Haddad, people try and find out, right? And this is also a paradigm to understand who the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When sometimes someone hears about a great alim or a great scholar or a great person of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they try to start finding out, but what are the qualities that they have that made them reach the station? What did they do in their life that made them reach this particular station? And obviously there might be things that this person might have done, but all of that means nothing, because the real fact of the matter is that Allah chose them for himself, and therefore he made them do these things. It's not because of what they did that Allah chose them. Allah chose them from before. The eternal ordainment was even before the heavens and earth was created. Allah chose that these would be his beloved, right? And it's because he has chosen them, therefore these actions then flow forth from them, and they then are able to fulfill their duty. And this istiqamah, so for example, they would say that just as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when he would perform his ibadah, and said, Aisha would say, O Prophet of Allah, you're standing awake at night and your feet are swollen, and Allah has forgiven your past and future sins. So why did the Prophet ﷺ say, shall I not be a grateful servant? And so when the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we hear about how they would fast and how they would stand awake at night and how they would give him prayer and charity, they were not doing those things, and we're talking of this level of awliya, the likes of the Sa'ad al-Alawi. They would not do these things to reach any station with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They had already had a station with Allah from before they were born, but they would do this out of thanks for what Allah had given them. And that's the difference with them and others, and not only them, but the people whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses to be spiritual guides in whichever lands they are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen them from when they are born, and while they are still growing up and young, they have their spiritual openings when they are still very young, and they realize, and they are inspired to realize that they have this great duty to perform. And so when they do ibadah and ta'ah and worship, they are doing it out of an expression of thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas we need to do the ibadah and ta'ah to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to try and rectify our soul, to try and get rid of all the evil qualities, right? Using these people as our guides, and then if we are sincere, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then accepts us. وقال الحبيب علي الحبشي, Habib Ali al-Habashi is mentioned in some lines of poetry also speaking about the Sa'ad al-Ba'alawi. And just before reading this, it's very important to realize, and we spoke about this before, because we are reading a book of Habib Umar, who is from the Sa'ad al-Ba'alawi, and we are ascribed to this path. Therefore, we have a bit more leeway when we are speaking about the Sa'ad al-Ba'alawi. But in the same way, when we listen to other people speaking about their mashayikh and different Sufi paths, speaking about their particular mashayikh, and we were reading their books also as well. For example, sometimes that their mashayikh would say that, they have been told that they are none and there are no ulama like the particular mashayikh and they have reached the highest levels, and that is absolutely fine. Right? Every person can be given the leeway to believe that their ulama and their mashayikh and their spiritual mentors and guides are the best of the best and the best that have ever existed, and there's nothing wrong in doing that, because if you thought that someone else was better than your mashayikh, then you're supposed to go and sit with those other mashayikh. And we do find this, right? And the Prophet himself would come to certain people and tell them certain things, and go to other groups and tell them certain things in dreams, for example. And this is all part of keeping people steadfast, because the goal is the same. And therefore, when these ulama and these awliya, who are the leaders of their lands or wherever they are, when they meet, they have absolutely nothing between themselves. They are almost like one. When they meet, they annihilate themselves into each other, and they have so much love and compassion. And when you see sometimes in the meeting that takes place between these ulama and between these awliya, you realize that they are almost like one soul but in two bodies. And if they were more than that, one soul in many bodies. And they have the exact same goals, the exact same objectives, and they only desire good and khair for the ummah. Unfortunately, sometimes the students of these people who create more problems, who try and vie with each other, and then in this way they unduly create the impression that it's these ulama and these awliya that have problems with each other, whereas this has never been the case. It's always the followers who have not been purified that have issues with the followers of other murids, and then this gives a bad impression to all the different paths. So Imam Ali al-Habashi says, فَإِنَّهُمْ قَوْمٌ مَا حَدْ فِي الْبَرِيَّةُ كَمَا هُمْ. Indeed, they are a people, they are none in existence like them. لا ترافق وتسحب في الخليقة سواهم. Do not spend time and do not take companionship of anyone else in creation besides them. فإنما لا كفر من هباته عطاهم. Because your Lord Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has indeed made expensive His gifts to them. He's given them many great gifts. جاد وأنعم عليهم. Allah has been generous and honored them. بالرضا واجتباهم. With His great pleasure. واجتباهم, and He's choosing them. يا لهم قوم يرضى ربنا من رضاهم. How great a people aren't they that Allah is pleased with their pleasure. And this is also the station that Sayyidina Fatima anha had. The Prophet said, Sayyidina Fatima anha, whatever makes her angry makes me angry. Whatever makes her happy makes me happy. Meaning, she has reached this level of understanding and ma'rif of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that she will not desire except what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever she knows is in the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so therefore, even the emotions become aligned with the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what they like, Allah likes. When it comes to things that are mubah, things that are merely permissible, if they like something, it becomes beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know also the Prophet once, when he went to visit, I think, someone invited him and he was eating a sort of porridge and there was some pumpkin inside, and the Prophet was picking out the pumpkin to eat. He said, before that, he was with the Prophet, and he says, from that day I loved pumpkin. Meaning that even a person's leaning. So for example, a person can eat any type of fruit, but because the Prophet ate this particular fruit, we see that Sayyidina Anas who starts to love this particular. Even those leanings which is permissible for a person to have an option in becomes aligned with the beloved, because the beloved chose this one. And so these are people whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's pleasure lies in their pleasure. And this is a great spiritual station. And this is why we don't hold the awliya and the ulama of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the same standards. And we don't hold them to this judgment of, but they didn't give me my right and they didn't give me my haqq. We gave the story of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, I think it was Sayyidina Abu Huraira. When Sayyidina Abu Bakr mentioned some words to him, some coarse or harsh words to him, and then regretted and wanted him to repeat those words back to him, and Sayyidina Abu Huraira said, no, I can't do that. And so Sayyidina Abu Bakr then complained to him and said, I'm going to threatened him and told him, I'm going to complain to you to the Prophet. In our estimation, we say the haqq is Sayyidina Abu Huraira. But then when they came to the Prophet, the Prophet took Sayyidina Abu Bakr's part and said, do not harm Abu Bakr. And he did this and he used to help me, and started to enumerate all of his all of his great qualities. Even though in the outset this might seem like the haqq was with, but people's stations with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is according to his istifa, according to his level of choosing them, according to his choosing them on a particular level, not because of the actions. Actions mean nothing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has knowledge of the first and the last. Time is not a matter of concern for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, even in Aqidah, they would study that Sayyidina Umar, anhu, even in the days before he accepted Islam, and in those days when he was even torturing Muslims, he was beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even in his days of kufr, he was beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because of Allah's knowledge that he would become Sayyidina Umar. And likewise, Allah's knowledge of who you are, Allah's knowledge of who people are, Allah's knowledge of who his awliya are, and those who would reach high stations, right, at the end of their lives, that is how Allah loves them now. We are the ones who are under ikhtibar, and we are the ones who are under test, because we don't know who has that station with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what the end result will be. So strive in that path which they strove, and drink from the water. Drink their water, meaning delve into the springs that they delved into. For example, the springs of knowledge, the springs of spirituality, the springs of da'wah. And the awliya, when they have these stations with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is not an iota of pride in their hearts in that they think they are better than anyone. Instead, they desire for people more than they desire even for their own selves. And talking of this as well, even in the Isra and Mi'raj, right, there is a famous, many ulama have written poetry, they have written these mawlids. One of the students in Tareem, he began to compile a list of a book that contained all the mawlids that he could get his hands on. It's over like 400 or something mawlids, and it's 4 volumes. And obviously it will continue to be compiled. And one of the mawlids is ascribed, obviously the authenticity might need to be checked, but it's ascribed to Shaykh al-Qadir Jilani. And very interesting, when he speaks of the Isra and Mi'raj, and we are on the morning of the Isra and Mi'raj, he mentions that even when the Prophet ﷺ was at his closest proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he did not forget his ummah, right? And he was receiving all of these outpourings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he was concerned about his ummah, and he wanted his ummah to contain these blessings as well. And that is why also in the tahiyyat, tahiyyatu lillahi wa salatu tayyibat, assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillahi salihin. This was when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala greeted the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet ﷺ then requested, or the Prophet ﷺ then sent dua for his entire ummah. And so they do not desire for anyone else things. They do not desire for themselves, except that they desire for other people more than they desire for themselves. And if one strives in their path and one partakes in what they are doing, then it is perhaps hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you from their gifts. And the gifts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the ma'rif of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that even the greatest of the awliya have, they have no problem that Allah gives those things to other people. And it has happened that Allah will give to others, right, as He has given to them. Because we said no one complains that someone else is taking their sunshine. There is enough sunshine to go around for everyone. There is enough of the ma'rif of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that everyone can have, and everyone have their fair share. لا تتركوا هذه الفرص. Habib is now speaking to the students and says, do not allow these opportunities to leave you. Do not leave these opportunities, these great opportunities. فالحق دائما ينتخب أناسا ويختار أناسا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always choosing people. Right? ينتخب is almost the term انتخاب is election. Allah is choosing people. يسجلون ويثبتون في دواوين الاختصاص مع الخواص. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is constantly choosing people and registering them where into the sigil, the registers of those who are chosen by Him and will become of His special chosen students. This is istifa. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has this, we spoke about this qualities. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has His special chosen people whom He then uses as guides for mankind. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is constantly joining to their ranks people, right? He's constantly joining to their ranks people, and He chooses these people. Why? They would say even that there is this istifa, there is this intikhab, there is an election that takes place in the heavens every evening at the time of tahajjud, right? people are looked upon. And who are those who are awake at the time of tahajjud? They are the ones who are then elected into this circle of ikhtisas. Not just that, who are the ones who are, for example, generous, who are the ones who have pure hearts, who are the ones who do not have anything in their hearts against people. All the different spiritual qualities and good traits which a person ought to have, right? These hearts are looked upon and chosen because these hearts are now worthy of receiving those gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this choosing into the special circle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Habib was saying, one particular person might be chosen لِإِحْيَاءِ السُنَنِ. One person, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might choose him and use him to become the manifestation of the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This person, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will use him to teach and give life to the sharia. This will give life to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This person, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will use him to give life to the sharia and to teach the deen in different parts of the world. فَعَسَى اللَّهُ لَا يَحْرِمُنَا. And so we make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not prevent us from being chosen by him. وَيُوَفِّرُ حَظَّنَا, inshaAllah, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase our portion from him. فَإِنْ آنَسْتُ مِنْهُ رُشْدًا فَادْفَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ أَمْوَالَهُم. The verse of the Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the orphans, and the orphans who have been orphaned and they are still young and their wealth has been looked after by the wali or their guardians. When it comes to giving their wealth back to them, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِنْ آنَسْتُ مِنْهُمْ رُشْدًا فَادْفَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ أَمْوَالَهُم. If you then perceive within them some guidance, meaning they now know how to use money, they're not going to become spendthrifts, they won't waste that money, then you're allowed to give their money back to them. So if you perceive within them guidance and give that money, you can then give that money back to them. And the implication Habib is giving here is that the spiritual gifts, right, and the spiritual stations and these wonderful things which we hear about will not be given to people unless it is perceived that they are worthy of it and they understand its responsibilities. And one takes the spiritual path also in the intention that perhaps one might be worthy of these things. A person, or for example, they would say a person does not give a necklace with pearls and rubies and precious stones. He does not put it on the neck of a donkey or on the neck of an animal that does not understand the value of these things. And so the whole spiritual path and the training and the three objectives is for people to learn the responsibilities, right? And then to test themselves, are they worthy? Many people, right? When they even begin taking the spiritual path and the path of knowledge and da'wah, they will realize that, you know what, this is even though I would like to, but this is not my thing. I do not have what it takes to bear these great spiritual stations. Right, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has already chosen whom He will give them to, and He will prepare them in that particular way. And many times it is people that are not seeking it out, it is people that are not wanting, because generally a person's heart, or a person who is not brought up in the company of the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they hear about these great spiritual stations and knowledge, they start wanting to take the spiritual path, but there is this hidden want and this hidden desire for fame or for wealth or for some sort of status. Because obviously if you're not brought up and you hear about these things, a person wants to run after it, but because they only hear about the niceties, they don't hear about the difficulties that come with these spiritual stations and how the awliya troubled and toiled in order to reach those stations. And Habib will speak about this also in the next chapter. وَيَأْتِ كُلَّ ذِي فَضْلٍ فَضْلَهُ. Also in the verse of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Hud, right, when Surah Hud, when the prophets were speaking to their people, and they mentioned to them that وَيَأْتِ كُلَّ ذِي فَضْلٍ فَضْلَهُ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will then give every virtuous person his virtue. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never prevent someone from something which they are worthy of. And if a person does not have anything which they desire, right, it means you are either not worthy of it or there is no khair in it coming to you, right? A person cannot be given something that they are not worthy. So if you feel that there's something that you don't have, we need to know that perhaps I'm not worthy of it, right? And this also requires self-accountability. And the second thing is, it might not be good for us. You might want a particular thing, but Allah knows that there is not good for you, and so therefore he's keeping it away from you. Even if it regards knowledge and it regards also spirituality and our person might want to be a big da'i and go around the world and give talks and lectures and call people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he might be thinking, how nice will it be that so many people accept Islam at my hands. But you don't know, that could be your destruction. That could be your destruction, because it will go to your head and you will become proud and arrogant, or something will happen. You will be set by some trial and tribulation with a particular person, or through wealth. For example, when the leaders and the presidents start wanting to give you gifts, and sometimes people will try to bribe you, will you be able to pass those tests? And so therefore Allah knows best what is best for you. And a person needs to be comfortable in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about them. You are where you are supposed to be. A person has to strive, and therefore the intentions, we said again, right? One of the easiest and closest ways to intend to be like them. The Prophet ﷺ said that it's so easy. If people knew how easy it is to gain with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? That if you see someone, an alim or person of wealth, the Prophet said that jealousy in Islam is not allowed except in two cases. A person, you see someone who's been given knowledge and they spend that knowledge and they are teaching, and so you desire to be like them. Or you see someone spending their wealth in khair, in goodness, and you desire to be like them, right? If you desire to be like them and you make dua for them, you get the reward for the same khair that they are doing. You don't even have to go through all the effort and the problems and, sitting with the people and all the tribulations that come with having the status in people's eyes. But desire khair is good for them, and make dua for them from the bottom of your hearts. Make dua for them. Even they say that one of the ways to even become close to your teachers and your shaykh is to make dua for them, because indeed it is a great responsibility that they have. If they had it their way, they would not want to do what we think that they are doing this out of because they want to. Imam al-Haddad also, he said if he had it his way, he would just go sit in the mountains, right, or in the jungles and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But they are given this responsibility by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and by the Prophet to fulfill this duty of the deen. They do it with a great amount of difficulty and a great amount of apprehension and a great amount of fear that they were not able to fulfill this haqq. And other people are having enmity towards them and thinking that they are doing it because of name and fame. Whereas if you make dua for them and you desire khair for them, and you desire the same, had you been given what they have been given, you will be given that reward, and the hereafter you will be with them. Al-mar'u ma'a man ahab. So the people that Allah has chosen, let them do the work, just love them, serve them, and you'll be with them. It's the quickest way for a person to reach. And then Umar goes on to speaking in this next paragraph, and it's quite a long one, but he's going to speak about this concept that we spoke about, how the da'wah is established, and that the da'wah of the awliya and the da'wah of the Prophet ﷺ was not established on ease and comfort, but instead it was established with great difficulty and great toil and trouble. And we in our times, alhamdulillah, we have things very, very easy for us. At the very least, we should be making shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't have to expend as much difficulty as our teachers in establishing the deen. Everything has been put on a plate for us. And this is also a form of blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which requires shukr, and it requires thanks. Umar then says, لا يضع أحد منكم في ذهني أنه غير خادم لحق ورسوله وشرعه فماذا سيعمل هناك. Habib is speaking to some students who had graduated and now they were going to go back to their countries. And he says, we do not want any one of you to have this thought in their mind that they are anything else other than a servant and a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet and the Sharia. A person who is graduating, he should not think that I am now an alim, I am now this, I am now that. I am a servant of Allah, I am a servant of the Prophet, I am a servant of the Sharia, and a servant of the deen. The Prophet also said, Sayyid al-Qawm khadimuhum, the leader of people is their servant. If you are an alim, if you are in a da'i, your duty is to serve the people. Right? فَمَاذَا سَيَعْمَلُ هُنَاك. What then is this person going to intend to do when he goes back home? Amalul Khadim, he's got to do the work of a slave, the work of a servant. Amalul Abdi ma'a Sayyid, he does the work of a slave with his master. Our master is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are his slaves. How does a slave interact with his master? Dawamu inabatin wa khashyatin wa khudu. And the slave with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in a constant state of humility, a constant state of turning towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This repentance, not just at the time of saying that I am repenting and Allah, I turn back to you, but it's a state constantly that we are sinners, and at any point we are making mistakes. And so this constant turning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَخُضُوعٍ وَخَشْيَةٍ, constant state of fear. And so the servant with his Lord is in a constant state of humility, constant state of fear, constant state of turning back to him. وَطَلَبٍ لِأَدَاءِ مَا أَحَبَّ اللَّهُ مِنْهُ, and constantly asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow this person to fulfill his duties in that which the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala lies, in that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. And so a person who is a slave and is doing, even though he might be an alim or might be a da'i, he's constantly asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide him to that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves, because he doesn't think that he's fulfilling the duty to the best of his abilities. Because a person who thinks he's doing anything in the most appropriate way, then this person obviously has pride in the heart, because no one has perfection besides the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فإن كان in Prophet himself, we know how he would be constantly turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness, even though he was the Prophet himself. فإن كان يخطر على بال أحدكم أن بناية الأربطة هو الغرض، أو أخذ الدروس هو الغرض، أو الحديث مع الناس هو الغرض، أو الظهور هو الغرض، أو الشهرة هو الغرض، فعليه أن يعالج نفسه بداويها. And so if it comes, or it passes by the mind of any of you, Habib is speaking now to these students who are graduating, that the building of institutes is the goal and objective, right? And Habib is going to mention a few things. He says that this person needs to purify his heart. He needs to go get cured of this disease. He says, if you think that the building of institutes is the objective, or the lesson that you are going to be having, or the lesson that I have, that this is an objective in and of itself, or speaking to people and going out is the objective, or amongst people, because when you do da'wah and you become known amongst people, or if you're becoming a teacher, if you think this is the objective, or if you think that fame is the objective, then this person has a spiritual disease in his heart. He needs to get cured. This person needs to fix himself up. None of this is the objective. The building of institutes, the having of halaqat and lessons, right? Speaking to people, going around, traveling, all the tools in which da'wah is done, none of this is the objective in and of itself. None of this is the objective. Even the building of Islamic institutes and madrasas, for example, right? None of this is an objective in and of itself. What is the gharad? Habib is going to explain what is the objective. The objective is أداء حق الأمانة لله تبارك وتعالى ببذل الروح والنفس, right? Conveying, right? أداء حق الأمانة, conveying the right of the trust of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this trust, this deen, right? If we can explain this deen in the three objectives, this is a trust given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be able to perform this duty of conveying this trust ببذل الروح والنفس, by expending to the utmost one's soul and one's nafs. Meaning, these things are not an objective in and of itself. The objective is to convey the trust that was given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through our teachers, and that now has to be the objective. How that objective then manifests, whether it is an institute, whether it is lessons, whether it is online, this all will differ from time and place. وَبِبَذْلِ غَايَةِ الْوُسْعِ وَالْمُسْتَطَاعِ وَالْقُدْرَةِ كُلِّهَا فِي الْعَمَلِ بِشَرْعِ اللَّهِ. So what is the objective? The objective is conveying the trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to us by expending one's soul and oneself. And then بِبَذْلِ غَايَةِ الْوُسْعِ وَالْمُسْتَطَاعِ وَالْقُدْرَةِ كُلِّهَا فِي الْعَمَلِ بِشَرْعِ, expending the utmost of one's capabilities and abilities and the power that they have to practice upon the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَنَشْرِهِ بَيْنَ الْخَلْقِ, and spreading this sharia in amongst mankind. How can we practice upon the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with regards to our personal ibadah? But for example as well, there is the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it comes to business. There is the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it comes to marriage. There's a Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it comes to the way society needs to be structured. And more so because we are living in an age in which the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not what people rule by. One of the greatest efforts that a da'i or a person concerned about the deen is to make is how to bring this Sharia back into vogue, back into practice to the best of their abilities. In your own home, in your own house, in your own business, for example. How many business people are there going about doing business and they do not even know the laws of the Sharia with regards to business? And then when people come and complain and they talk about this, this their business partner and this particular, they have a fallout, whatever, and when you look at the dealings are riba upon riba upon riba, interest upon interest upon interest, not even knowing simple rules of interest, how the Sharia does not allow these things. And then you see how the businesses are affected, right? Just the dealing in interest, the Prophet ﷺ, he spoke about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, when he speaks about interest, he says that those who partake of interest, they will be like one who has been affected by shaitan. I mean, they almost be like one who has been raised by a devil. And then this person's lifestyle ends up, becoming, this person's life ends up in a mess. And they have problems, and they have marriage problems, and they have problems with their children, and problems with their business, and there's no barakah in any projects that they do, all because of interest. And if a person had learned the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with regards to this particular aspect of his life, then instead of having difficulty, he would actually be blessed and have barakah. And we will continue with this chapter tomorrow, inshallah, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us tawfiq. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wa billahi shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal 'asr, innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal 'asr, innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal 'asr, innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr.